Hi, it's Kayla again, and we're back with how to reduce PMS naturally. At the end of this video, you're going to have 5 ways that we can reduce PMS throughout the month, as well as when symptoms happen and pop up. After this video, in the next few videos, there's going to be one that goes deeper into each one of these reasons or ways to support our bodies and help prevent or reduce PMS. So if you stick around, you're going to get an overview, and if you want, all of the links for those videos will also be in the description. So if you find one while you're watching that you want to watch in more detail, you can be able to find the link below. I hope you stick around for the last one because I think that one's probably going to be the most powerful method for preventing and reducing PMS symptoms that I have to talk about today. So let's dig in. First is changing our diet. Now, some people might roll their eyes at me, but really, we have to eat. This is one of the biggest areas that I feel we have autonomy, we have control over how our body is affected, and we can affect how our body is functioning very powerfully with what we put in it, what we fuel our body. And so that is one of the biggest and most powerful ways that I myself have been able to prevent and reduce PMS symptoms. So our diet can impact our health by the level of inflammation that we have in our body, contributing to how our hormones are produced, how many stress hormones are produced, and how many feminine hormones are produced. The ovulation, the development of our uterine lining, as well as when those hormones start to peak and then suddenly kind of crash down right before our menstrual cycle, how that will affect us. And when we provide our body with the nutrients that it needs, the vitamins, the minerals, that can really help with preventing PMS. Having foods that we aren't going to be reacting to also can be really helpful. For me, removing gluten and dairy really affects my mood. It improves my mood drastically. So those are some of the things that I use. And as I mentioned in the diet video, following this, we'll go into a deeper dive of how we can use diet to help reduce PMS symptoms. Next is herbal remedies. So for me, those consist of things like tinctures as well as teas. I'm more apt to use teas for these types of things simply because they have a warming effect for my body when I'm about to head into my menstrual cycle. Things that are warming tend to be more enjoyable for me. So those are things that can be helpful. And as I mentioned, we'll dive deeper into which types of herbs, but I think everyone's going to need to find what works best for them because everyone's going to have different PMS symptoms. Then you're going to have to find what herbs are going to help with what symptoms you're experiencing. So those are things to consider. And now number 3 is building your period emergency kit. Now we're all going to have a period that might not go how we plan. And for me, I like to have things on hand in my home. Sometimes I even bring them with me in my purse or my bag that are going to help me in a pinch. If I get really bad PMS symptoms or I start to get cramps, I keep these things on hand. And so I'm looking forward to teaching you guys how I've built my own emergency period kit and what I put in there. So look out for that video in the next coming weeks. But just to give you an idea, I'll go over briefly what some of the things that PMS causes that I have remedies for in my kit. So a few of the things that I struggle with in my own PMS symptoms are things like water retention and bloating, anxiety, depression, and cramps. I'll get them before I start my cycle sometimes. And so I have tools that I have multiple tools for some of these that help me be able to better manage those symptoms if they do happen to show up. But I do want to just do another plug for diet. And really, for me, when I have my diet a little bit more consistent, it's primarily plant-based already, but when I'm making sure that I'm eating things that are whole foods, that aren't processed versions of plant-based foods, then I really end up finding that many of my symptoms are mild. So I really think that that is a foundation to start, and then some of these things can be added on as a just in case or if they happen. So before we go into number 4, I did want to let you know that if you really want to learn more about the hormones for our luteal phase, which is when PMS strikes, it's right before we go into our menstrual phase, and this is going to have a different set of hormones, and it's going to look very different than most of the rest of the month. And so if you really want to learn about that, I have a video. I'll link it up here, and I'll link it in the description below for my luteal phase video, where it goes through what that looks like hormonally, why we can get PMS symptoms, and some ways that we can support ourselves during that phase nutritionally. So I really hope that that might be useful for anyone who wants to review or dive a little deeper. Number 4 is changing period products. Now, this might sound a little silly to some people, but for me, when I was younger, I thought the only options were pads or tampons. I wasn't really a big fan of either of them. Pads are uncomfortable to me, and tampons they caused me a lot of cramps. And so for me, changing some of those helped make my whole menstrual experience a lot smoother. So I was able to reduce my cramps. I didn't have to feel really worried beforehand, whether I was going to get my period, am I going to stain my pants, things like that that can make you feel even more anxious. So that was really helpful for me to change out what I was using, find what worked for me, and most of all, find sustainable products that were financially sustainable and ecologically sustainable. So I'll go into those in the video about this as well, so you can know a little bit more about what I use, what I've found, and my experience with that. And last, and what I feel like might be most important, is balancing out stress. Now, I'm not going to say stress reduction, because really stress is part of life and you can't get rid of that completely, but we can buffer it. There are ways that we can buffer stress in our body, and there are practices that can help with removing that stress that's built up internally. And so one of the things that I've found that's helpful for myself, but journaling can be really helpful. I've used it at times that are peak stressors, and that has been really helpful for me to be able to have a place to share feelings that won't affect any of my loved ones, my friends, or family. And that way I can decompress and be able to get that out of my internal dialogue and out of my body, but it protects my relationships. If I'm frustrated with someone, especially when we're in that PMS time, we might feel something that maybe is justified, but how we react might not be the best. So making sure that we have an outlet for it, it can be written, and we can go back to it if it is a valid and justifiable issue when we might be at a better time to be able to deal with that. And the other way that I really like to be able to handle and de-stress or balance out my stress levels is through guided meditations. Personally, I'm not someone who can very easily get to a meditative state without being walked there. So guided meditations for me are very helpful, and I'm really looking forward to the videos for this one. I will go into a little bit more about journaling, but I also plan to have a guided meditation for PMS. So I hope that'll be useful for you and a tool that you can start to use this month and coming months. I hope that this was helpful. If you found any of these really helpful, insightful, let me know in the comments, and I'd appreciate if you liked this video to thumbs it up, and that way it'll tell YouTube that this is something that you enjoyed as a viewer and suggest it to other people like you and other people who might find it helpful as well. Well, I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, be well.